climate change is a really pressing priority that needs action and not just talk. The world is feeling the effects. We don't have time to go into all of the evidence that points to it, but I'll leave it at 96% of all scientists around the world are at edem. They're unanimous in their view that humans contribute to climate change and climate change is happening. And locally, we're not spared. Lake levels are at an unprecedented high. What used to be considered 1 in 100 year flood happened much more frequently than once a century. And we have been in a state of climate emergency now for a few years. We're one of many municipalities that had to declare such an emergency. So really what's important for the Thrive board, as well as the collaborative as a whole, is whatever decisions we are making, whatever initiatives we're proposing, we will put a climate change lens to them. And the goal is to contribute to some solutions as opposed to compounding the problem. The quote that you see at the bottom, I'm a lawyer, I teach law, and so the Supreme Court of Canada is my go-to reference source for a lot of things, but our highest court in a very recent decision said this in paragraph 2 of their decision. This was the carbon tax case. Climate change is real, full stop. It's caused by greenhouse gas emissions resulting from human activities, and it poses a grave threat to humanity's future. The only way to address the threat of climate change is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I don't know how much more clearly it can be stated. There is a problem, we're contributing to it, we have to be part of the solution. And that doesn't mean waiting for the United Nations to take care of it, or for China to get on with it, or to wait for the federal government to do more. Everybody has to play a part at each level of government, down to you and I and what we do. And so at Thrive, we're hoping to really foster a culture of thinking about climate change in all of the things that we do as a town. So as I mentioned earlier, Amherstburg declared a climate emergency in November of 2019 when we had those terrible floods that affected so many communities, neighborhoods in town. We're one of over 500 other municipalities in Canada that have had to do so. The declaration at the time in November of 2019 mentioned that the town would be embarking on a review of its official plan, but so far as we know, nothing has been done. There have been no investments made to address climate change in any of the recent budgets. And of course, there are things that could be done. So when people ask, what can I do, or what can a small little town of Amherstburg do as far as addressing this gargantuan global problem? Well, one is to lead by example. So municipalities have a responsibility to lead the way by focusing on creating energy efficiency within its own operations. And so again, when we're as a group putting forward ideas to the town, this may be one of them. There is a regional energy plan that provides a really good, concise list of things that every municipality, including Amherstburg, can do to lead by example in terms of retrofitting its own buildings, switching to electric cars, investing in green energy, creating incentives for green energy. So that's one thing to do. Now, this Essex Regional Energy Plan was just approved unanimously by County Council last week, unanimously, so every town. And it was great to see our mayor and other representatives from Amherstburg really vocal at that meeting and championing some of these issues. So the next question is, what action will the town be taking to address the mandate that it endorsed in the Regional Energy Plan? And so we're going to be educating ourselves. I'm not a climate scientist. Like Lisa said, none of us are experts in everything, and most of us are non-experts in everything. I'm not a climate scientist, but what I am aware of is litigation. And there is an ever-growing trend of climate justice-related litigation. I don't want to see the town caught in those crosshairs. Like I said, I want us to be proactive for the sake of our kids, for the sake of our own quality of life. So we want to keep council moving forward and not forget that this is a plan that they endorsed. And there are tons of ways that we can do it. So all of the other initiatives you've heard about so far tonight and others you'll hear of, all of them in some way can contribute positively to addressing greenhouse gas emissions. Obviously, cycling and open streets, walkability, planting trees, reducing parking in order to incentivize walkers and cyclists. All of these things are beneficial in their own right, but also have a positive impact in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And this is my final slide. And it's, I think, a concise way of looking at how other groups, other community groups, as well as cities and towns all over the world really think about climate change. You think about adapting to what has already been done. And unfortunately, there's already a lot of harm that's been caused by climate change. So we have to worry about adapting to the harm that's already been caused. Things like flood protection, infrastructure, building design, disaster management, having a plan, and not just being sitting ducks for the next major flood. But then there are things we can do to mitigate, to slow down the pace of climate change. And that kind of proactive stuff is also what we're going to be focusing on at Thrive. So looking at cycling, not just as a sport, not just as a leisure activity, but as an active way of transportation. You know, I live over by Middle Side Road. My daughter works at Sobeys. There's no reason why she shouldn't cycle to work. And so I'm going to be encouraging her to do that, although there are a few spots along the way that are going to be a little bit tricky and hazardous for her. I would love for it to be a safer way for her to get to work. We can talk about energy efficiency, as I said, leading by example in terms of the town's own buildings, but also incentivizing green economies, drawing people, because Amherstburg could be a town known for its attention to the environment and climate change, creating that kind of buzz that might attract green business as well. So lots to talk about, and happy to continue learning as we will have a tremendous opportunity to learn when Thrive's first speaker series starts with Claire Sanders just a few weeks from now.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, thank you. One question for you before we move on. Some people might ask and wonder why, because you've already talked about it, right? Climate change is a thing, and it's a big thing. And so, how does a small town like Amherstburg, you know, do something? And why should we spend town funds to do it? You know, we have a lot of things we can be spending money on in the town. Why should climate change be one of them?
Well, let me just answer that question with the words of the task force chair from the Essex Regional Energy Plan. So there was that big meeting that happened last week. And in his words, the cost of doing nothing far exceed the cost of meeting the climate challenge head on. So if your only concern is dollars and cents, and you know, that isn't, I think that there's a lot more to having quality of life than simply looking at the bottom line. But I'm not an economist, so that's my bias. But if that's all you care about is the bottom line of dollars and cents, then know that not doing anything now is going to cost us more in the long run. It's going to cost our children more in the long run. So that's the short answer to, I think, a pretty complicated question. But politicians, scientists, you know, urbanists, everybody agrees on this. Sitting back and thinking the problem's too big and it'll either go away on its own or someone else is going to deal with it is just not a rational approach.